Tyler Duff. I said, get on the formula.
This is Appetite for Distortion.
Welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Distortion, episode number 315. My name is Brando. We got two guests for you today. Coming up later on in the show as part of our Appetite for Discovery segment. We haven't done that in a while. Loudwire just named Goodbye June as one of the 11 bands that are leading the classic rock revival. So we're going to bring on the lead guitarist, Tyler Baker. Actually, the Loudwire article compares the lead singer to Axl. So does that make Tyler Slash? But first, we're going to learn a lot about this guy, Jesse Dayton. He is a brand new memoir, autobiography, if you will. It's called Beaumonster, B-E-A-U Monster. We're going to talk about why it's called that. And the dude, as a musician, has worked with Willie Nelson, Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, Rob Zombie, Mike Ness from Social Distortion. So a lot of people. And for our purposes, we're going to talk about his work with Duff McKagan on Tenderness. We're going to talk about, of course, Shooter Jennings on that record and Glenn Campbell. Who would have thought there would be a GNR tie to Glenn Campbell now? So without further ado, hey, Jesse, how are you?
Hey, man, how's it going?
I am living the dream. Where are you zooming in from, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm on tour. We played in Phoenix last night.
Okay.
And, I got up at the very ungodly, un-rock and roll hour to do this interview, and I saw that Glenn Danzig and Chuck D had reposted about my new book, so I don't care what time it is right now. It's awesome. Everything's great.
Oh, yeah, especially Mr. Danzig, one of the... Because you did like an Elvis Danzig thing. You jumped right in.
Yeah, it was, Glenn Danzig is a long way from playing with Glenn Campbell.
Ah, yes. All right, so let's get right into it. For those who, because obviously we're already name dropping. And when you're a young guy, and so I guess I'm curious, why the book now? I feel like you have a lot of experiences still left to live and people to meet and albums to make. So what made now the right time?
Well, I mean, thanks for the compliment, but I was born in 66. So I'm 55. And I started playing with a lot of these greats, in my 20s. And it just felt like a good time. I mean, who knew that when I got offered this book publishing deal that the proverbial rug would be pulled out from underneath the universe. So musicians, if you want to write a really good book, spend 19 months off tour.
Okay. I like how you start the book too, because obviously I've done my research for this, and we'll get into, I know you a lot through Duff McKagan, if you can tell the name of the podcast, GNR theme, we'll get to that. Sure. But I like how you, in the early part of the book, you're like, why the hell is Jesse Dayton writing a book? So I guess, why do you feel? Yeah, there are famous people you talk about, but what made you want to tell your story?
Well, I think really what it was, I've always been a writer, and I'm making basically the second version of this right now as we speak. I mean, where the book ends, I just had played in Jamaica with Lee Scratch Perry, and then did this thing with Glenn Danzig, and I thought, I've got plenty of stuff. What happened was a friend of mine who's a literary agent was having dinner with this guy who was the editor and publisher for Hachette Books. And he said, I think this guy's got a really good book in him. And she goes, who? And he said, Jesse Dayton. She goes, I know Jesse Dayton. And he said, well, tell him to send me 3 chapters. So, this was a real, I think the reason to answer your question is because it felt good.
Okay. What was the most exciting part for you to want to get out? Because there are a lot of, readers or, people who listen to podcasts, radio, they like hearing the big names, Rob Zombie. But what I always like is the upbringing, to figure out what makes this person tick, what set them off on this path, this life path. So, to talk about, I guess, growing up in what it's called Beaumonster, you're from Beaumont, Texas. I just had my before the pandemic, I visited Texas for the first time, Austin. So I guess if you can tell me more about that area, the music scene, and how it shaped you.
Oh, absolutely. And God bless you for going to Austin. That's been my hometown for the last 25 years.
Oh, nice.
But, it was an interesting time because my parents were the first ones to make it out of the oil field and go to college. And so I grew up on the Texas-Louisiana border. There's all these Cajuns everywhere. So you got Zydeco, you got rhythm and blues, you got Cajun music. And then you got all this country stuff, This is the 70s. And so it was kind of the tail end of this kind of colloquial regional thing before, you had these huge companies that would come in like MTV and Live Nation and, buy all the radio stations. And so you had regional hits and stuff like that. So a lot of that stuff influenced what I was doing. And, I got to hear all these great blues players from East Texas. And I got to go see Freddie Fender with the first, kind of Hispanic, before the last teardrop falls and Wasted Days and Wasted Nights. And they're making hits, right down the street from my house. George Jones went to high school with my dad. I mean, it was an amazing place. And so when I was listening to what every other little kid at that time was listening to, my playing just sounded a little different than maybe all the kids that were at the guitar school in Los Angeles, and I had done my 10,000 hours of listening to Jerry Reed and all these great country guitar players. But of course I loved Hendrix and Billy Gibbons and, the usual suspects.
Sure. Who was the first artist, I guess, that you worked with when you were like, this is my career, I can make a living at this, as opposed to a passion and see where it goes? Was there a defining moment early on where you're like, I'm going to be okay? I figured this out a little bit.
Absolutely. That's what happened. Because my parents were like, they wanted me to go to the University of Texas and go to college. And I was making $500 a week playing with an all-black Zydeco band out of Lake Charles, Louisiana. And I got to go do this session when I was 18 in Houston for this renowned producer named Huey P. Moe. And he had this band called Rockin' Dopsy. And they were a Zydeco band. And they had this huge worldwide hit called Don't Mess With My Toot Toot.
Okay.
And I just kept bugging him to produce me, and he never would. He goes, but I'll let you come play on this session. So I went in and played on this song with Rockin' Dopsy when I was 18, and he gave me I played on a few of them, but he gave me like $500. And I was like, okay, this is for real. So I went and took my old man out for barbecue and broke the news to him, and he was like, go with it, dude.
And I'm glad you went out for barbecue. I definitely made sure to get barbecue when I was in Austin. I went to Austin City Limits before the pandemic. Yeah, it was a great experience. And maybe since you're a Texas guy, I made sure to wear my old school Houston Oilers hat, and I got a
nice. Yes, man.
I have a lot of old, sports memorabilia and apparel, and I got a lot of compliments for that.
Man, Bum Phillips and Earl Campbell were that was the thing when I was a kid. I mean,
yeah, it was Warren Moon for me. I'm 38, but so I still remember the Oilers though. It's not all. It hasn't always been the Titans.
No, absolutely not.
So when did you meet Glenn Campbell, if you don't mind me asking? Because
That's like, and not to date you or anything, but that's a name I always heard through my mom. And when he was sick, my mom would always tell me, because she was such a big fan. And with me and Guns N' Roses, they cover Wichita Lineman, and that kind of made me fall in love with the song I wasn't too familiar with. So
Sure.
from somebody who knew him, can you tell us what it was like working with him and what kind of man he was?
Well, when he walked up, I was with a full band, and we were on stage, and the first time I met him, we were going to do this thing at the Americana conference in Nashville. And it was kind of, he had just signed some big record deal in Los Angeles, and they were trying to launch his career, which is ridiculous because he's Glenn Campbell and he sold 1 trillion records.
Right.
But they're trying to get him to a new generation. And he walked up on stage, and first thing, I couldn't believe how good he looked. He looked like a superstar. And, he just looked handsome and just in shape, and he looked great. And he walked up and he said, son, do you know most of the guitar parts? I said, yes, sir, Mr. Campbell. I brought, 2 vintage Martin acoustic guitars and 2 vintage Fender Telecasters. If you don't want to bring your stuff out here, I've got a whole rig for you. And he goes, yeah, I might shake my butt a little bit more and let you play some guitar tonight. And which I thought was really funny. And you can see some YouTube footage of us playing together, and we did, all the hits. But I will tell you this, by far the most demanding guitar gig I've ever played. It literally made every gig after that easy.
Wow.
Yeah, because Glenn Campbell was a shredder. And anybody will tell you that from, whoever. I mean, Jerry Cantrell or whoever, they'll tell you that Glenn Campbell could shred on a guitar. And, there's some similarities in our careers where, Glenn played on a lot of records. He played on Strangers in the Night by Frank Sinatra, and he played on a bunch of Beach Boys hits and worked for Phil Spector as a session musician. So Glenn Campbell was really cool, man.
Yeah. Just what a career. And I feel, given my age, I can't help it. I kind of missed out on just his prime. But again, I guess it doesn't matter when you discover, as long as you discover. So as I mentioned, when Guns N' Roses reunited, they started doing some covers of people who had passed. They did it for Chris Cornell and Black Hole Sun. And then they play Wichita Lineman after Glenn Campbell, which was surprising to a lot of people. Soundgarden, Guns N' Roses can cover Soundgarden, but Glenn Campbell. And what was surprising to me was just how amazing I think it stripped down that cover of Wichita Lineman, which leads me to my question to you, because it felt like it was in that band's pocket, not with GNR Lives, but with Duff, specifically the album he just came off of with Tenderness. And that was like really his style, the country style. Yeah. So if you could talk about, because I know it was through Shooter Jennings, if you could talk about that experience working on Tenderness with Duff and Shooter. Well,
let me just preface it by saying that Guns N' Roses are some heavy, heavy musical cats. And I mean that because, you see the image kind of it kind of just takes over everything. All you think about is the debauchery and Slash with his hat and his shirt off and a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. But let me tell you, when you get those guys away from that scene, these guys are incredible songwriters and musicians. They can play anything. And that's what happened. When I met Shooter, I ended up working with Matt Sorum before I met Duff. Okay. And I was blown away by what a great musician Sorum was. He could play anything, and he helped write arrangements. And then, I got brought in to play. Shooter brought me in to play on the Duff record. And the thing about Duff is the cool factor is through the roof. you meet a lot of guys and they're all kind of into the same thing, a lot of bands, but I think, Duff kind of brought, if you look at those songs on Appetite, they all 5 wrote those songs. They all literally had a hand. And if you listen to Duff's solo record that I played on, you can hear his style. If you go back and you can hear which parts of the songs he had a hand in. Because Duff has a real definitive thing. But Duff, hey man, Duff has been a big influence on me, really more so outside of music, as far as just living and learning how to take care of myself and experience as much as I can and stay open to stuff,
What do you think about when it's a rocker coming? Duff he's had a long career, so it's not exactly, Slayer going country, but when it's a rocker going, and it's not, I know it wasn't a country record per se, Tenderness.
No, I know what you mean.
But when it's that style, I guess, what did you think? Because there are, like Steven Tyler, he did go flat out country.
I'll tell you what, I'll tell you where this comes from. Mm-hmm. My favorite rock and roll band of all time is the Rolling Stones. Mm-hmm. I'm a complete nerd for the Stones. I've seen them 23 times. And I saw him on the last tour before Charlie passed away because I knew that he was 80 something and that there was no way he was going to be able to keep up playing the drums. And so Duff and those guys get that. And when you listen to those old Stones records, whether it's like Sweet Virginia or Honky Tonk Woman, they've all got this kind of country vibe to it, but it's not full-blown country. And I think that is just the evolution of rock and roll, because Guns N' Roses would go on to become, as big as the Stones would. And it's just passing the torch. But it's cool, to think that, that these are, people who are exploring music. They're not just these rock stars living this debaucherous life. They're people who are like, wow, I like this Johnny Cash song. I like this Waylon Jennings song. Maybe we could try that. And really all the great bands, Zeppelin, Stones, Beatles, and into Guns N' Roses, they all did these versions of their idea of what they thought country was.
Is there a label, I guess, that you want? Do you look at yourself as a country artist? Do you look at yourself as just an artist? Or I guess if someone were to ask, again, going back to that initial thing that you put in your book in the first few pages, why the hell are you writing a book? If someone had to, and obviously I know why, but if it's somebody that's just finding out about you, I guess, how would you describe yourself, if you can, without, obviously you did it in a book, you described yourself in a book, but if you're able to be like, hey, I'm this kind of artist, are you able to do that? Or is it too hard to kind of pinpoint?
Well, I usually tell people that I play country and rock music.
Okay.
And of course I've done a lot more than that. I played Zydeco, I played blues, I played, all kinds of stuff. But
stuff. We haven't even gotten to the horror stuff that you've done. These cover horror bands with Rob Zombie. So is that something you ever, does that come? That's why I'm asking, because it's like you say one thing that you've done, and there's so many other things. So I guess if you had to and I ask this sometimes, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was just happened, or they had this ceremony, hasn't been televised yet.
Right.
And I use sports comparisons a lot too. So if your jersey, so to speak, was going in the rafters for a team, or if you were going to get a bust in the Hall of Fame and you have one team to pick, is there an artist you would pick that you worked with and say, hey, this was my proudest moment? Are you able to do that?
Well, as far as artists that I've worked with, it's kind of hard to do that. Although I will tell you, Waylon Jennings was probably the coolest in terms of just being outlaw, dangerous. Can I cuss on this?
Yeah.
Punk as fuck. just didn't care, zero shits cared, just total 1,000% badass. Waylon was. But I mean, for me, I've had a weird career, and it's been hard for people to market me because I did work with Rob Zombie and I did work with Duff, and I did just finish playing guitar for Glenn Danzig, which is a long way from Glenn Campbell.
Right.
But I think that, it's a different time. It's a different world now, the scenes aren't what they used to be. People have playlists and they're varied, and they're listening to a lot of different stuff. And, hey, it might be kind of cool to bring this guy in, and maybe he'll put a little, chicken picking on this solo, and it'll, be a different flavor for the record. And, so that's kind of how I get the calls.
I like that. Jesse Dayton, this was a real pleasure. Congratulations on the book, Beaumonster. And I hope we do this again. And perhaps I'll see you when you come to my neck of the woods and play in Brooklyn.
Absolutely, brother. Come down, say hello, and we'll put the face with the words.
You got it. You have a great day.
Take care, man.
Jesse's a cool dude, right? You could totally see why he and Duff got along. And I'll use this as a teaser, as I am going to bring back another segment after we do Appetite for Discovery right now with Tyler of Goodbye June. But I'm going to do my monologue. And within that, we'll talk about some interviews I would like to have happened concerning the Tenderness record. All right, so there's a little teaser. But first, Tyler Baker is the lead guitarist of a band called Goodbye June. So we're going to talk to Tyler in a segment we like to call Appetite for Discovery.
I just want to bury appetite. That's the goal. Bury appetite.
For discovery.
So Appetite for Discovery. And I'm not going to be, I'm never too cool for school. I'm not cool at all. But I feel, though, out of the loop, and I'm catching up, Tyler. Goodbye June. I found out about you guys just a few weeks ago. And I feel like I've just, as I just mentioned, missing out. So I was excited to talk to you today. So first of all, welcome, Tyler Baker, guitarist from Goodbye June.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks for having me on the podcast, man. Like I was telling you before, big fan, love the podcast, love what you do. I love that freaking Wolf Mother interview y'all did. I think it was like a week or two ago, maybe. It was awesome, dude.
I appreciate that, man. I thank you. I have that sometimes. It's like quick side note, what Tyler just did as we were talking off the air before we started recording. I'll have guests on, my lack of ego, my crippling depression. I think nobody listens to me. But as Tyler did, you do your due diligence. Like, hey, you're going to do an interview on Appetite for Distortion. Oh, what is this about? It's not like I'm Howard Stern. So you found it. And the fact that you not only found me and agreed to it, you like some of the interviews and the podcast. So that means a lot. So we're fans of each other now. So.
There we go. Yeah, dude. Absolutely. You're on my podcast list now.
Right on. And perfect timing today as we record this, because you were just named within Loudwire, and I appreciate Loudwire picks up a lot of our interviews as well. You were named one of 11 bands leading the classic rock revival charge. And I guess we probably had some of your friends on here, like Mike Miley from Rival Sons, who was on the list. Tyler Bryant and the Shakedown was on the list. And then Goodbye June. So did you read that? Do you know about the, because I saw your Twitter handle and your Facebook handle shared it, but I don't know if you're the social media guy.
No. Yeah. Always when you get kind of something like that, especially from Loudwire, I personally pay attention to Loudwire. I kind of follow what they do. So it was kind of funny how it reached me. It was like, I was just kind of seeing it and I was like clicking through it. And it was like, 11 bands leading classic rock. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. See who's hot or whatever. And, I scroll through. I was like, oh, hey, I'm in this. So and then like about 30 minutes later, our publicist and our management sent it out to, said, hey, you guys were just featured in Loudwire. So it was kind of cool to like discover it somewhat naturally. But yeah, no, what's funny is there's a couple of Nashville bands in there, and a lot of people that we've toured with, like some great bands some great dudes like Dirty Honey. I'm good buddies with John Nato, the lead guitar player. He stays with me when he comes to Nashville. He kind of usually stays with me at my house. So it's so good to see those guys being so successful. And obviously the Greta Van Fleet guys are on that list. We're good buddies with those guys. But yeah, and like you got some freaking stallions in there, like Lark and Poe are just monsters. And I'm so happy. What I think is their due. I don't think anybody's doing them any favors. I think they're freaking going out and earning it. And because they're awesome. They're monster players. And they've been around town for a while and very well respected. So it's really cool to see Lark and Poe and Dirty Honey and my band and just a lot of good people on that list, like people that I know personally, and I'm kind of invested in their well-being. Like I want them to succeed, you know? So it was really cool. It was a really good list. And there was a couple of bands in there I didn't know. So I got some homework to do. I got to check out Crownlands. I'd never heard of them before. And yeah, I want to check those guys out.
Yeah. Rock is not dead at all. And we've, like, as I mentioned, we've had a couple of these acts on here already and to talk to you and what they wrote. And the fact that you honestly, for anything, discovered it organically, I think is just amazing. It wasn't like, as you just described, it wasn't like your manager sent out a press release or something, and it just, you're scrolling through like I do a lot of times. And I'm like, oh, they picked up one of my interviews. And they're like, oh, we're listed in this, really very cool. I just like, that's what people want. They want the classic rock sound to come back, I think, because the classic is, I don't know, maybe I don't think it's a dirty word, but maybe there's a label to it. But maybe we'll talk about that. But yeah. I love that they wrote, and it just because it ties into what we do here. Like several others on the list, Goodbye June are a Nashville-based band with their style rooted in blues, but their influences really span from gospel and country to grunge. They have a gritty sound and powerful energy. One that stands out about them is frontman Landon Milbourne's vocals. Like Axl Rose, he's almost able to manipulate his vocal style to fit the mood of the song, making for a different listening experience with each track, which is true. But first, if Landon is like Axl, are you like Slash? You guys like the Axl?
Hey, I would take it, but I personally I feel more akin to maybe a Billy Gibbons versus a Slash as far as the school. But dude, what's funny is Slash taught me there was a technique in the Sweet Child of Mine solo. So I was probably circa like 17, and any guitarist out there will know what I'm talking about. He clicks on the wall and he's doing these, we always call them in the guitar world kind of 3x3s, which means you go up a scale 3 notes at a time, and then you play the next note and you go up 3 notes and you go up 3 notes. And it's a very particular technique, and it's something that Slash uses and I think perfected and kind of brought, I don't know if he brought it to the masses or not, but it's like this iconic, it's the big build up in the solo where he finally clicks on the wall and Sweet Child of Mine. And I remember sitting down and learning that, and that was one of the first big solo-y moments in my life, that kind of transitioned me from just kind of playing chords and cowboy chords, as I call them, to trying to become a lead guitar player. So that's my part of my Guns N' Roses like legacy, that Slash left on me. It's funny you bring that up. So
look at that. I mean, that's amazing. That's what I call the 6 degrees of GNR Bacon. That's what I call it. It's fate. I mean, today we scheduled this like a week ago, and then today there's an article comparing your lead singer to Axl, and you tell me about how Slash influenced you. This wasn't part of the one sheet. This wasn't part of my research. I love comes up organically, and I was surprised though to hear the comparison to Axl, because the guy who brought my attention to you guys, he's like, you gotta, tell me what you think about this band, Goodbye June. And he sent me the video for Step Aside. And I'm just, holy shit, if I could say so. I mean, like, holy shit. It sounds like, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of just like that Bon Scott era AC/DC and the Southern style rock, hence Nashville. And I'm like, okay, what is to sound like, and it just sounds so fresh. It's like Bon Scott's kid. I don't know. It was like, married to Steven Van Zandt and like created his baby, and it was just, I don't know. I was blown away. So I became a fanboy for a second. Just absolutely blown away. So, what do you think? Where did your sound, I guess, come from? Everyone else in Lowbone.
Well, I mean, dude, we've been around for a little while, So it's like we moved to Nashville in 2009, and we're three cousins, so we had played music before we moved to Nashville together. We'd get together and we play gospel tunes, at church and different things, and we'd always kind of peripherally played music together, meaning that we would come together at family events or whatever, and somebody pick up a guitar, or back in the day, Brandon would, my cousin Brandon would teach me a Creed riff, at Christmas. He'd be like, dude, I just learned My Own Prison. Check this out. He'd show me, a riff from like Creed's first record, which it's funny. He was really into that record, and it got me into it. Right. So we both, yeah, I mean, dude, we both geek out over the first record. Actually, the first two records, we were like, I would say, pretty awesome. And beyond that, hey, it's awesome. I actually, dude, I got a story. Let me finish this thought, and then I want to transition into like a geek out story.
Sure.
So anyway, so we started then, and we came down to Nashville and really went for it. And if you listen to our discography, which is 3 records available, we actually have a 4th record out there, but it kind of got shelved on Interscope. In our first major label deal, they took our independent record out that we'd put out ourselves, and they said, hey, we'll do something with this later. And then, it's just shelved forever until our lawyers, get it back, which probably will at some point. But anyways, doesn't matter. And I say our lawyers like I got a team of lawyers. We don't, but we'll hire a lawyer at some point to get that old record back. But if you kind of look at our discography and you ask, how did you guys get to where we're at, where Step Aside is? And it was a journey, man. So like, what's funny is that Loudwire review, it sounds like that guy did whoever wrote that, or that person, sorry, they did their research through our discography, because I feel like the first record, there's always these elements of grunge. And then earlier in our career, I think we had this little bit of like gospel sensitivity to us. That was this blues based thing, but it had soul to it. And that came up in a couple songs. Right. And then our second record, I feel like, was more of again, it was kind of grungy, but we did a little more Beatlesy stuff. We did a little more exploration in like Beatles and Led Zeppelin land. So you'll hear a song like Live in the Now, which was popular off that record. And that's a very uniquely written song, I think. We'll probably never write another song like that. To me, it was very Beatles, and kind of dove into that a little bit of psychedelica world, and a little bit of grunge in it too. That's what's funny about us, is we all grew up cutting our teeth, and we all listened to, the hot bands of grunge, but we were towards the end of grunge. Right. So it was like Nirvana in utero, like was more like when we were really getting influenced by grunge. So, and then, we're on our third record, and there was just something that we had all decided on. It was during the pandemic. We were didn't know what to do. Right. Everything got taken away from everybody as far as musicians go. And, from a business standpoint and from a touring standpoint, I mean, we canceled, like 40 shows opening for a major act. And then we were planning on doing, we had like 12 festivals in Europe already lined up, and we had a big year. Like I would say our biggest year ever. Mm-hmm. It's kind of that moment where it's like, you look at this piece of paper and you see your life planned out for the next year. And it's the first time in your life that it's like this, like as a musician. And it was super exciting and super amazing. And, but it got taken away. COVID, canceled everything. Right. So we had nothing. We were kind of in this valley of definitely a low point as far as morale goes. and just like a lot of people. I'm not saying that we were worse off than anybody. We had our health and
Your story. Can I get?
yeah. You know, we had our health. And so I don't want to complain or say my pain was worth someone else's, because we made it lucky. We got very lucky. So anyways, so we decided to go to my garage, and we set up a 3-piece kit, and we were playing, and there was something really cool about what we were doing and cultivating in that garage that lent itself to this, what you're saying, that Step Aside song. That Step Aside is like, it's in some world of like early AC/DC, and you know, you might say Leonard Skinner. I would say personally, and this is not intentionally at all, but like that song takes me to like second, third record, Kings of Leon. Like for me, like I was a big fan of Kings of Leon back in the day during those first records. And there's something about that third record that I was Step Aside kind of reminds me a little bit of Camaro. Okay. I don't know if you're familiar with that song, but I mean, obviously it's not a nod to it at all. It sounds nothing like it, but that's the way it made me feel. Like when we were writing, I'm like, yeah, man, this is like, it makes you feel like, you know, Camaro versus, you know, like a, you know, iconic AC/DC song. But anyway, so we're going down this road, and it felt really good, man. And like we always do with our records is we're going to release a couple singles leading up to the record that are going to be very much in the vein of Step Aside. Like we released another song called 3 Chords that is a little more rolling. It has a little bit more of a Rolling Stones kind of juke rhythm to it that it kind of gets you bouncing and swaying a little bit more than a regular AC/DC song would. But you're going to find that there's about 5 or 6 songs that are all in this world. And then in Goodbye June fashion, we take a couple departures into like Black Sabbath land and like this kind of grungier thing, kind of like we always do. We always tell ourselves we're not going to, like, hey man, let's keep it straightforward, this record. And it's always, every time it's like, oh, we got to throw in a little grunge, you know. there's got to be a little bit in there. So you'll have it. There's a song called Nothing on there that's very very grungy. It's the grungiest song on the record, probably maybe one of the grungiest songs we've ever done. But it's sitting next to, you know, like 3 Chords, you know, which 3 Chords is a very classic song, as you might say. So anyway, yeah, so that's the chronology of the record, and kind of how it came out and how the sound formed. You know, the sound was just us being raw 3-piece and trying to give Landon more space in the song, which it was a conscious effort on this record. Like, we got to give Landon more room to work to show off his vocals so you can hear how the details of his voice, right? Because if you're just banging away on, you know, 2 guitars and a bass, like you can lose some of Landon's really cool nuance, which I think sounds like you're picking up on.
Yeah, and you mentioned the song 3 Chords, which is just 3 chords. I was fortunate enough to be sent the you know, early screening of the record, I guess, if you can phrase it that way. And it is a journey. You know, I say AC/DC, and that's the quick thing, you know, to say, but that's not, you know, you're kind of just doing yourself a disservice if you're going into it with just thinking AC/DC or just thinking Leonard Skinner. You mentioned, I mean, Kings of Leon and grunge. I mean, these are all sounds that you make work together. And that's what was so refreshing to me, because, you know, without naming names, there are bands that sound classic rock and they just sound like a classic rock cover band. I'm like, they're great musicians, great singer, but I'm like, where are the songs? Right. You guys have the songs, you know, to me. So it was very cool. And I'm a terrible liar, so I wouldn't be saying these things. And I got to give a shout out to your cousin Brandon, who has a cooler last name than I do. Mine's just, you know, Weissler, you know, nice Jewish boy from Long Island, and his is I'm going to mispronounce it, Quackenbush.
Quackenbush, yeah, Quackenbush. It's like a Dutch German kind of name. It's he always gets comments on it, but what's funny is there's like 2 or 3 Quackenbush families, like where we come from, like in southern Indiana. Yeah. So it's like not super rare there, but yeah, it's funny you bring that up.
Oh, sorry, and I can now. I have to bring it up because it's stuck in my brain. It just making me think of DuckTales, like the quack.
Yeah, no doubt. Right.
So you guys are all cousins. Are you guys all kind of in the same age group? Because I'm not too close. I have some close cousins I'm close to, but I'm the oldest of 4 brothers. So I mean, I got to imagine it's like a brotherhood more so than
Yeah, it's like a brother. And we all grew up. We're pretty close to the same age. We're all a couple of years apart. So it's close enough to where we're all experiencing a lot of the same things in life, and we're experiencing them together, So that's always what it's been, man, is we started the band and just sticking by each other and always, there's always ups and downs, and you get told no. You move to Nashville and you think you're the baddest band in town. And especially if you're doing something like we're doing, which, like you said very graciously before, it's like it's something fresh, it's something different, it's something that's combining some elements that maybe don't make sense on paper, but it's like when you get the right configuration of gospel and grunge and AC/DC and old Kings of Leon, like, and you kind of mix it together and got a voice like Landon's, it just makes sense. And so we got told no a lot though, because we got told no like a million times in this town because we didn't sound like, active rock radio. Like we didn't at all. And
good. I know it's good.
Right. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's, for better or worse, and there's great bands on active rock radio, and we hope to be on active rock radio at some point, but it just, at that timing, we were really, I mean, there was only one band that I knew of, which was Rival Sons, which they were included on that list. And that was when I first moved to Nashville. Rival Sons was just getting going and getting kind of some steam behind them, back 2009-ish. And that was the first time I'd ever heard a band that was in the universe of what I wanted to do. Right. That was somewhat popular on like a radio station. Like you could hear it on like Sirius, or you could hear it whatever. I think they had come out with Pressure in Time was their song. It was the first time that I'd ever heard a band, besides bands from the 60s or 70s. But I was like, I don't want to be a 60s or 70s band. I want to update it, and I kind of want to hold myself the same standards that they had, which was like plug a guitar into an amp, have a drum kit, have a bass, have another guitar, and have a singer, and don't overproduce it. Don't overthink it. How good of a song can you write? Like that's what, like that's always what we held ourselves to, which is like, hey dude, if freaking ZZ Top can have, a 50-year career, without any member changes or anything, God rest Dusty, he just passed. But, like these guys follow that rule. Like a lot of our heroes follow that rule of like, dude, it's not rocket science. There's a couple guitars, a bass, and some drums. Let's sing songs. And it's like, it really boils it down to how good of a song can you write? How effective can you be at your instrument? And you don't use like, a lot of modern accompaniment. And that's what we always held ourselves to, maybe probably to our detriment, but we always held ourselves that way. Like this last record, we cut it to tape, we cut it to like an old 1960s style tape machine that is way outdated and like has no modern technology really tied to it, and it's like, but what's funny is that's why I feel like when you listen to Step Aside, it feels so real. It feels so visceral. And it feels like that's why everybody's like, oh man, it takes me back to how AC/DC made me feel. And it's like, yeah, it's the point, man. It's like, we're not hiding behind, a big computer beat, or all this stuff. And I'm dogging bands that do that because I listen to a lot of bands like that. Like there's a place for it. It's just, I never could do that. We could never do that. We would suck at that. You'd never even have heard of us if we went down that road.
And I don't want it to be everybody. Yeah, there are bands in active rock that I do like, but when it's just everything is the same. And it's like, all right, where's the variety? And there's a certain sound, obviously doing a GNR themed podcast, a certain sound that I like. Bluesy rock. Yeah, I hear you playing Night Train in the back, I guess. I don't know if that's a train passing by. I hear some sort of horn going.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. I'm in East Nashville and I'm on my back porch, on my back deck. And there's a train that goes by the house. So sorry, all you listeners out there.
No, not at all. It gave you a good Night Train segue. It was perfect. It was brilliant. I think. Pat myself. But what I like, not just with the songs, I mean, with the songs, it comes with being like a real person. And you can't fake that. And, what I found interesting about you specifically and me, and I mentioned earlier, I'm the oldest of 4 brothers. And Goodbye June is an ode to your brother. Is that something that's, it comes up in interviews? Is that something hard to talk about? Or was that a kind of a strategic thing that you want to talk about your brothers always?
Well, I think, yeah, of course, always. Like anybody who asks about it, I'm more than happy to tell about it because, I feel like, the dead live on through our story, our memories that we have of them. So talking about them, which is, I know that's really stupid, not stupid, but really kind of out there, but that's kind of my take on it is like, so I'm proud to talk about my brother. He was a great person. I was 18 and I was getting ready to go from high school to college at the time. And my brother was about 2 years in on military training and service. He had been through, I think his second big training. He's getting ready to go into military intelligence to be a field interrogator and also Army Airborne. He was a really physical guy, really, really good at all that. And he'd come home on leave. He had a couple weeks off and it was so he could spend time with me before I went to college. And then he had a tragic car accident during those 2 weeks and passed. So Landon and Brandon would come up. Landon was living in Evansville at the time, and Brandon was living in Jackson, Tennessee. And they come up and they stayed with me Brandon stayed up with me for probably about a month and a half. He got a job. Like me and him were working at a car detailing place together. And so he just stayed up there with me because he knew how tough it was, because my brother Shane was such a big part of our family. He's this larger than life character. Everybody loved him. He was always making everybody laugh. And like, he was just a big part of the family. And so obviously me and my mom and dad were taking it really hard. So Landon and Brandon would come up as much as they could. And Brandon actually stayed with me for about a month and a half. And during that time, we played a lot of, like, that was our big thing. That's how we connected. And that's what we had in common, a big part of it. And it's, everybody was kind of grieving. And so we played a lot of music during that time. And those were the beginnings of band. So we actually wrote a couple songs during that era. And as things progressed and we started playing shows out, we decided that, I was really depressed. So I didn't want to go to college. I didn't want to do anything. I wanted to stay home with mom. I was like, I'll get a factory job. And I just want to be close to my family because I knew mom and dad were taking it really hard. And mom made me go off to school, but I wanted to be an engineer. But that, like, after my brother passed, I was like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm going to just get a business degree, just something middle of the road. And I'm going to study music and I'm going to be in music. And as soon as I'm out of college, I'm going to go pursue music. And during that time, me, Landon, and Brandon, we decided that we were going to be a band and we needed to move to Nashville and we needed to do this, we needed to do that. And so when it came time to name the band, my cousin Brandon coined the name Goodbye June. And we thought that was a really cool way to commemorate that era of our life, like that time that we come together. It's almost like if you would have wrote a book about the grieving and the family and coming together and creating a band and writing the music and living beyond that, what would you title that book? Well, that book would be called Goodbye June. That's kind of like what we what we come to. So we wanted to name the band after it. It's a little morbid, yeah, and it's a little. We always get in the early days, man. It was always like, "Are you guys a metal band?" Like, cause it sounded like a metal band name, I guess. And I was like, "No, not really. You just gotta listen. You gotta listen to us." It's like. So, anyways, we get some slack for that a little bit because it sounded real heavy. But yeah, man. So that's the story, and I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of the band name, and I'm proud of how far we've come with it.
As you should be. I mean, as you should be. And I mean, if anything, I thought maybe it was a girl, and this, was kind of like an ode to an ex-girlfriend kind of thing. But as I did my research, that kind of made me love you guys more. I mean, I don't look at it as something morbid. It's a living tribute. That no matter how the band came together out of this tragedy, and I know it's years later. I'm very sorry for your loss. As a brother myself, I can't imagine. But for the music to come out of it, for your cousins, for family to get tighter in that time, which they should, it goes to show you there are some very good Brandons out there. So shout out to Brandon.
Yeah. Y'all cut from good cloth.
I think so. I think you do. And you're wearing some, and to tie it all in together, you're wearing some good cloth on your, I guess that's going to be your album cover. I mean, who's the one in the fur coat? It's
that's me, baby. Come on. Oh, that's me.
I love it. Yeah.
Dude, I seen that. So there's a shout out to her name's Raina Gear. Raina Gir is her last name. You can look at her on or search her on Instagram. Super talented stylist, and she lives really close to me. And we got hooked up together we have a mutual friend named Maggie Rose, who is a incredible soul singer. So anybody who digs like soul music done really right, check out Maggie Rose. But anyway, so I was out at a show and I see Maggie. And Maggie always looks just awesome. Like when she's on stage, she looks A+. And me, like our first two records, we had always just kind of done this like not biker, but like this grunge look. I mean, it's like we were a grunge band, right? And we had this look, and it was real tough. And but sometimes, man, our songs aren't not so tough. Like you listen to Darlin', on our first record, or you listen to I Don't Mind, like on our second record, and these songs not tough, and so we always had this look on stage, and it's just kind of what had come natural to us in that time of our lives. And what's funny is we were opening for ZZ Top, and Billy Gibbons was out there. He was listening to our sound check, and he comes up to Brandon after the sound check, and he's like, "Hey, boys." And we're like, he's like, "Hey, Mr. Gibbons, how you doing?" He's like, and he said, "Your songs don't match your look." That's all he said. And we were like, I was like, we're kind of all taken aback, and it was really, for me, is a little heartbreaking, because I was like, I mean, Billy Gibbons was like, I mean, he's up there with Creedence Clearwater Revival, like top 3 for me, like as far as like just living legends, like guys that I just love everything that they do. And so he said that, and man, it like penetrated my soul. And he wasn't being mean. There was no malice to it. He just was honestly saying, "Hey, you guys, I mean, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I feel like he was saying, hey, the songs are good, guys, but you guys, like, the look isn't here yet. Like, why are you dressing like you're a biker gang?" And obviously he didn't say that. He just said, "Your songs don't match your look," and like floated off in the distance with like a haze behind him, like floated away like some sort of Jesus Christ like character. So that had stayed with me, right? So when you're talking about the fur coat and the look of the new record, I'd always that has rung in my head ever since that, for years. And so I seen Maggie out. She looked great. And I said, "Girl, who dresses you? Like, what do you do? How do you do this?" And she's like, you gotta hang out with my girl Raina." And so she gave me her number. We linked up. She loved the band. I gave her a sneak peek of the new record. And she's like, oh, I got you. She's like, and so we end up spending like a ton of time with Raina at her studio. She's got a little studio here on the east side of Nashville, which is full of clothes, like full of just awesome, crazy clothes. Anything you want to style a band, she's got it. And so we spent some time and we like cultivate a look. We're like, yo, let's go all white. And I was like, you know, is there anything like in this like Fleetwood Mac ZZ Top world that would look cool and kind of be cool today? She's like, yeah, I got you. And like she started pulling all this stuff. So I seen that coat in her studio, and that coat immediately spoke to me. Like it like reached out and said, it's like, you and me are going to be best friends. So it's like, and so I picked it up. I said, Raina, I was like, do you think I can wear this? And we put it on. She put some like round glasses on, like what I have, like, you know, kind of John Lennon style glasses or whatever. And she's like, yeah, this is the start. This is the look. This is the start of the look for the whole band. And so anyway, so it was fun. And we had never really done anything like that, like put that much effort and professionalism into our look before. And it was a lot of fun, and it's cool. And I think it sets a cool tone for like the record that I hope it looks modern, but yet obviously it pays homage to like Fleetwood Mac and ZZ Top. I mean, I think so anyway. That was the whole goal in the studio anyway.
I think all of it does, man. That's what I said at the beginning, Tyler, was the sound is it's fresh. It pays homage, but it's new. It's your own. It's Goodbye June. And then that's what it sounds like you, and you're looking like you. So I couldn't pull off that fur coat. So it works for you. All of you guys look great. Landon, Brandon, and Tyler. So
Yeah.
Goodbye June. See Where the Night Goes comes out February 18th of next year, which you can pre-order now on like earache.com. And you got vinyl, you got t-shirts, you got tote bags. Anything I'm missing before we let you go?
No, man. We got just pre-order the vinyl. We'll have some more songs coming out. We'll have one or two more singles leading up to it. So we're really excited about the next one. The next one's planned on being I think it's in December. It's coming out middle of December, and it's the title track of the record, which is one of my favorite songs. Which, if you thought Step Aside had an AC/DC vibe, I think you're really gonna think See Where the Night Goes has an AC/DC vibe too, man. That one's the most AC/DC of all of them. So, not intentionally by any means. It's just the way it come out, you know, when we wrote it. So.
You can't control that. Just it comes out, and that's the way it should be. That's what rock and roll is. I think just have it come out, and it is what it is. That's sometimes I have to tell myself with the podcast, like, don't edit it to make my sound self better or with the ums and just no. All the blemishes, all of it. That's rock and roll. And I hope to see you live, man, when you're in the New York City area. You know, this is something I want to experience live and in person.
Absolutely, man. You hit me anytime. You're guest list for life, my man.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks, Tyler. Thank you so much. And I hope to do this again.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Well, hey, thank you. I want to thank your listeners. Thanks for checking us out. Hey, do yourself a favor, do that Loudwire, go to that Loudwire article and check out all those bands. There's so many great people and great bands and great musicians in that list. Like, support them, buy a record, buy a t-shirt. It makes all the world of difference, especially right now with, you know, touring kind of in flux. So anything you can do to support your favorite artists, please do. It helps so much. So thank you guys.
Tyler's right. If you haven't read that article in Loudwire, I did retweet it. The 11 bands leading the classic rock revival. There are bands we've had on the show and some we should have had on the show. Maybe will, but that leads us to this. My monologue. Monologue. You know you missed the sound bites. I got to bring them back. I'm not in the studio anymore since the pandemic. I don't have a soundboard at the ready. And with my home set up, I don't want to I don't want to overcomplicate things. But earlier in the episode, I mentioned, as we're talking about tenderness with Jesse Dayton, interviews that should have happened. I mean, do you remember, for those who have been listening to this podcast since episode 1, where I thought Shooter Jennings was going to come on the podcast because, well, I was told so by his people. I don't know who was directly with, but people who, handle him. And I think much like the Duff McKagan interview, when he was promoting tenderness, Shooter had no idea, Duff probably had no idea, but there was somebody in that management team that said, no, it's not happening, for a Guns N' Roses reason, I guess. However it's worded is maybe changes, but they will sometimes look at this as a Guns N' Roses podcast. Well, yeah, and now we're splitting hairs. I call it a Guns N' Roses themed podcast, but it's funny, as I get off the phone right now with Tyler, he's like, oh, we didn't talk enough about Guns N' Roses. Oh my God. I don't want to talk about Guns N' Roses every second for an hour. That's not what this, sometimes the show is, it is about that. If we have Doug Goldstein on, but sometimes with Doug or Alan, or, we'll talk about depression, we'll talk about their interests. I think we would all get bored if it was just nothing but wall-to-wall GNR stuff. There's only so much to say. I mean, I've been squeezing out a lot over 300 episodes. I've squeezed out a lot from a band that doesn't make a lot of news. Not now. They did, back in the day, but now they're, when they're touring, sure. They released 2 new, if you want to use air quote, songs this year. So there was news, but still, for the most part, what would this be if all I was doing was, rehashing the same old stories about the story of Sweet Child of Mine, or comparing, what's their favorite song? We have that fun on social media, but for a podcast, no, it's just an organic conversation. GNR is, if you're listening to this podcast, I don't need to over-explain it to you. So it was one of the bands. So we did get in that article, yeah, of course, we got Goodbye June on. Rival Sons listed. We got Mike Miley, the drummer, on. From Tyler Bryant and the Shakedown on that list, we got Tyler Bryant and Graham Whitford, Brett Whitford from Aerosmith's son. So we got two guys from Tyler Bryant. But as Tyler Baker just mentioned, Dirty Honey is on that list. And here's kind of where my monologue is. This is what it's about. Dirty Honey. I mean, I've come so close to getting them, and I want to be vague just because people don't deserve to have their names mentioned. Everyone's just trying to do their job the best that they can. So it's not like I'm trying to call anybody out like that. I just more about letting you know about situational issues. No one name-wise deserves to be called out unless it's something like, malicious or hurtful or something, illegal, or none of that shit's happening. So the guy who works within the Dirty Honey camp, and I may have said this before, at least on an Instagram Live, I know I did, also works in that tenderness camp or the Duff camp. So the same person that canceled Duff also canceled Dirty Honey on me, or won't allow me to. And this same person said no to me recently from Miles Kennedy. And I've had Miles Kennedy, as you know, on the show before. How does that happen? Well, I'll tell you how. Miles, like a lot of artists, have a lot of managers for different projects. So Miles has people that work for him for his solo stuff, people that work with him for Alter Bridge, people that work with him for Slash. So the people that are close to the Slash camp, like Dirty Honey is, or was, I guess, now that I'm told that may have changed, I'm not allowed to interview them because it's too close to the Slash camp, which translates to Guns N' Roses camp. But what is that like? I don't really understand what that means. Why is that a bad thing? Why is that a bad thing? So, I inquire about clickbait. Yeah, that's part of it. Sure. And I kind of pressed this person for, because it was just too many people that I was not getting an interview with. I'm like, okay, it's Dirty Honey, it's Duff McKagan, it's Now I can't get Miles again. Like, what's going on here? Is it me? Did I do something? Am I unprofessional? Because when I air these things, when I do my monologue, I'm not told no, or a situation that doesn't work out, I just immediately air the dirty laundry. No, these are things that have been happening for years that I need to bring up now, because it's like, why don't you get this person on the podcast? You got Miles on before. Well, I can't get him now because now he's with Slash, because that makes sense. And I have no doubt in my mind, Miles has no idea. I was told by the rep I dealt with at that time, when Miles hung up with me, he said, that was cool. He liked my interview. And I'm told he's the kind of guy to say, you know what, I don't want to do an interview with that person anymore. He's like a nice guy, but there are, interviewers that are after clickbaity stuff. And this was an example, actually. This was confirmed to me. So I know it was in my paranoia that there are some guests, or interviewers rather, and that they watch out for this, that will ask kind of like setup questions that it's going to lead to a headline. Blabbermouth kind of questions, Loudwire kind of questions. And I'm not even shaming, because I mentioned it before. I'm friends with Brett Buchanan from Alternative Nation. I'm not going to tell these sites how to do their job. It's if they want to use, interesting headlines to make you click, the clickbait. I mean, is it really hurting anybody? It may be annoying as shit, but is it really hurting anybody? So, but that's their business. It's not mine. I don't do that. I don't title my episodes crazy things like that. But so that's when it gets frustrating. It's like, okay, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I get these opportunities? Just like I did. We did a whole episode about this. Episode with Rick Dunford. Don't ban me. I think it was episode. No, it wasn't 300, but it was around there. 300 was Jerry Cantrell. But just the things that I've heard about GNR management steering them away from interviewing with me when I've had them on before. It's not even like a first opportunity and trying to get that first chance. Like when I earned the opportunity to finally talk to Miles, and it worked out. It wasn't like, he had a bad experience. There was bad clickbait. You can't interview him again. No, this is just entirely different situation. Just happens to be with the same person. If that makes any sense. I guess it does. So I just want you, the AFD show listener, to know these things. Because you'll see, and congratulations to my coworker, Andrew McNaughton, who interviewed Richard Fortas recently, but that was through Gretsch Guitars, and it was more, very equipment-oriented interview. Those are the things that you're going to see. But people are like, oh, well, you've had London Hudson on twice. Why can't you get Slash? You've had Susan McKagan on twice. Why can't you get Duff? It's more about not just being told no. That happens. But when the yeses are out there and something is stopping it for whatever reason, and, there's no communication there. So it's just like, okay, you can't help but wonder why. But that's okay, because we've had over 300 episodes of this podcast, so I think we're doing pretty well. I think so, yeah. So as I've suggested so many times throughout these 315 podcasts, if you have a guest suggestion, be sure to hit me up on social media and let me know. Many of you have done that. Facebook.com/The AFD Show, Twitter @The AFD Podcast, Instagram, Appetite for Distortion. If you want to email me, theafdshow@gmail.com. And if you have a suggestion of a guest, I love using you as a producer because you're not going to tell me no. And also, you can be a part of it. You can be the guest co-host. So just find me on social media and say, hey, what do you think about so-and-so? Let's see if we can make this happen. That's how the Rick Richards episode happened. Shout out again to Izzy in Argentina for that. And look, it's just somebody who inboxed me and said, kind of was the producer for me and say, kind of, what's next? What do you want me to do? Do you want me to reach out on my behalf? Do you want this person's email? I mean, it's so many of you listening right now, you bad apples, have helped create so many episodes of the Appetite for Distortion podcast. So perhaps the next episode you will produce. Actually, no. The next episode is all me. We got David Plastic coming in. He is an iconic photographer. You know that photo of Slash and the Easter bunny ears and the Easter nose, the bunny nose? That was David. So yeah, David Plastic's going to be the next episode of Appetite for Distortion. But after that, who knows? But I will say before I get out of here, however you listen to the podcast, I ask that you please subscribe on YouTube as well. So in between the podcast, in addition to the conversation continuing on social media, what I've been doing, I've been spending a lot more time on YouTube creating playlists. So there's an entire section of just highlights of the AFD podcast. 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, just shorter, clips of just, Jerry Cantrell and talking about the Axl Rose demo tape that was thrown out, Alice Cooper talking about The Garden, Pauly Shore talking about Where's Axl Week on Totally Pauly. All these, so many of guests and so many highlights can now easily be found on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. So if you listen, whether it's on iHeartRadio or Apple Podcasts, if you don't normally listen through YouTube, just give it a subscribe. Check it out as well. And especially now, and look at this little announcement. I have no soundbite for this, but I'll just go. I'm finally making some change, some quiche, or some change with YouTube. So very little. So if you want to help contribute, I don't like taking your money. Yeah, we have a Patreon. You can buy T-shirts through Redbubble if you would like. Actually, one of the shirts, I'll just say it before I forget it. Rest in peace to one of my 3 cats, Mr. Big, aka Pig. You may have seen his pictures on social media, one of which was with an Appetite for Distortion T-shirt. So he was, 15 years old. I miss him very much. This awesome dude. Sometimes he would be hanging out in the background in some episodes. So, if you don't want to buy a T-shirt, if you don't want to spend the money on Patreon, just throw a like to and subscription rather to YouTube, and that'll help me. That'll help me pay the Animal Hospital bills. It's just terrible. Anyway, I don't want to end it on a sad note. So, when is the next episode of Appetite for Distortion going to come? In the words of Axl Rose concerning Chinese democracy, you'll see it. I don't know. As soon as the word.
Thanks to the lame ass security, I'm going home.